Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Skydio webinar. We're excited to have you here today. We're going to let a few folks trickle in. It looks like everyone's working their way through the door here. So we'll sit tight and in a minute or two, we'll get started. In the meantime, it's always great for us to hear where everybody's from. So jump in that Q&A box, jump in that chat box, and let's have a party. I'm joining you here from San Francisco. Colin is on the East Coast in a much more remote and peaceful location, I'm sure.
And colder today, unfortunately, cold and rainy. But yeah, joining you guys from Pennsylvania. Happy to be here.
Where's that Q&A box? Let's see where everybody's from. People are still trickling in here. We'll give it another minute. But thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, looks like we got North Carolina, Raleigh.
All right.
New York City, DC. All right, East Coast is on board. Florida. Good deal. Pittsburgh. All right.
Ann Arbor. All right. My girlfriend's from Ann Arbor. Here she is. Thank you for being here. I see Concord, California. Got an uncle from there. Thanks for joining. We've got Texas. We've got Ottawa. All right.
West Coast is coming in. I see Lakewood, Washington, Sacramento, Arizona. Nice.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here and sharing that. Of course, we're excited to be able to talk to you. I'm excited to get to talk to you virtually. Colin has probably traveled to your neck of the woods to talk drones or train drones or do something interesting there. But we're here to present to you today on behalf of Skydio, and we're thrilled that you're here. We've got a large and growing and international crowd, so don't you worry, we won't be getting nervous. It's all the same on a webinar. We can't tell how many of you there are when we're talking. So let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, everybody's going to get a recording of this webinar. It'll get sent out to your email address that you registered for the session with. So don't you worry if you miss something. You can always come back and relive all the great moments like Colin's synchronized dance routine at the 45-minute mark. So we all have that to look forward to. Everybody is welcome to jump into the chat and the Q&A to ask questions. We have two product marketing managers in the chat who are there to be able to answer your questions, such as Steve Fisher's question about when will the X2E be available and the MSRP. So they'll be in there. Go ahead and fire away with those questions. And if you can stump my teammates, you don't win a prize. Today, Colin and I are here to talk to you about a quick overview of Skydio. We're going to talk a bit about the power of these autonomous drones and this wave of the age of autonomy that is sweeping the entire drone industry. And then we're going to talk about best practices for the age of autonomy. And you'll see that we've got the world's leading expert in how to transition from a manual drone implementation into an autonomous drone implementation here in Colin Romberger. Real quickly, my name is Guillaume Delapine, often mispronounced as Guillermo del Drono. I'm a product marketing manager at Skydio. My job is one of the cooler jobs in our whole company, probably besides Colin's. I get to talk to customers, figure out what's working, how these drones are completely changing what they can accomplish in their enterprise use cases, and then come on these webinars and with them and with my teammates, Colin, just tell the world about the impact that autonomy is having across defense, across a public sector at the state and local levels, and enterprises of all shapes and sizes and applications. So really excited. And on a lot of these webinars, we bring in leading experts, as many of you I'm sure have gotten to see from our customer base. Right? So in the past, we've had Jacobs Engineering and Sun Construction, the North Carolina DOT, the Civil Air Patrol. Representatives from all those organizations have made appearances to come and share some of their expertise. But recently, Colin Romberger joined the team, and we said, well, let's look no further than our new friend and teammate, because we do truly have one of the world's experts on board here. So Colin, maybe you can give a bit of your background and kind of where you've come from in manual drones and give folks a preview of what we're going to be covering today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Guillaume. Really glad to be talking with everyone today. I'm sure I've probably met some of you in person over the years. My experience comes from just being able to get out there over the last 5 years and hear your stories. Hear what you're trying to accomplish with drones or what you are accomplishing with drones. And being really, a sounding board and hopefully a guide, to make the process better and make drones more valuable to you. And I've said for many years that the future of drones is obviously more autonomy. The whole promise of drones is that they're a force multiplier, and they're able to do more than we can do ourselves. So, this idea of drones as simply a one-on-one type of interface, just like a pilot in the cockpit of a manned aircraft, which, don't get me wrong, huge fan of manned aviation myself. I've been involved in pretty much every facet of it. That's really not what drones are. That we need to get to the point where using a drone is something that one person can be monitoring many drones as opposed to just working with one. And that's what we're here to talk to you guys about today, because having joined the Skydio team, that's what we're accomplishing, and we're seeing it already, and we're really excited to roll that out to everyone else and share with you what we've been able to do. So.
Cool. Well, Colin, I'm so excited to be sharing a webinar with you. I'm going to just get out of the way as much as I possibly can here. But let's start by giving a bit of a company overview. Many of you looking through the attendee list have been on these webinars before, and we certainly appreciate you coming back for more. We'll be just giving a quick introduction to Skydio for those who may not have heard of us yet. We were founded in 2014 by leading experts in aviation, AI, and robotics, who really pioneered autonomous flight technology at MIT. And since that time, we've gone on to become the US's leading manufacturer of drones. By orders of magnitude, we build and ship more drones, and we do it all from right here in these United States of America. So we're very excited to have that mantle and take that responsibility to make sure that our domestic manufacturing base continues to innovate and stay ahead and win based on superior products. And to that end, we also are very proud to be recognized by groups like IEEE Spectrum as the world leader in autonomous flight technology. Our drones are bringing about a completely new way to think about flying your aircraft that looks and feels different to the pilots, and also looks and feels different to the program managers who need to manage all of these pilots and are able to reap all these economic benefits, as we'll cover shortly. We've also become a trusted drone provider to the Department of Defense, not only by becoming one of the 5 Blue UAS companies that were identified by the Defense Innovation Unit as trusted providers to the DoD, but we also have been selected for final integration into the Army's Short Range Reconnaissance Program. And that's on the strength of going above and beyond the Army's spec and being able to provide an autonomous experience that is able to be deployed a lot faster through such a large and heavy organization as the US Army. So we're really excited to have crossed these thresholds to where we're seeing this success across all of our markets, especially if you look at IEEE Spectrum's perspective on things, being able to differentiate our products against our competitors selling manual drones, where the pilot is responsible for everything involved in keeping the drone off the ground as it flies. We'll be talking now about why autonomy is such a game changer. And everybody in this webinar is here because we understand that drones hold the promise of massive impact. Right? We all probably joined this industry or are looking at this industry as a way to change our operations, because we see all the benefits that drones can have, right? Whether it's consumer cinematography, working in enterprise applications on job sites, helping in public safety, helping in defense. The promise of drones is just spectacular, and you don't have to think very hard to get excited about them. The challenge is the whole industry has been held back by manual drone technology. And if you look at the leading drone programs out there, one great example is Aeronide, who came onto this webinar a couple months ago, and they had done a calculation that 82% of their drone program's budget, about 80% is the number that we calculate, goes to pilot training and salary. And you can look at, you look at the way that people are coming at these drone decisions. They'll look online, they'll talk to a reseller, and they'll end up going with the cheapest drone. And that's the wrong decision. If you look at the way that these costs break down, drones are getting cheaper and cheaper. LiDAR getting cheaper, cameras getting cheaper, batteries getting cheaper. But what's not getting cheaper is human capital, because as these drones get more expensive, you need higher and higher trained pilots to be able to keep them off the ground and be able to do effective things with them. And so the result is that you're left with these drones that are easy to crash. They're not scalable. They're expensive because after you got to replace them after a few crashes, your costs really start to add up. And at the end of the day, what you're investing in hardware is very small compared to what you're investing in all of the extra visual observers that you need. And I've got a ton of stories about this, but Colin, I'm sure you do too. Stories about how when you've got a manual drone up there, it can take multiple people to be able to operate that thing. Is that something you've seen, Colin?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the complexity of the system, the complexity of the data capture, it's not uncommon to have one person flying the drone, one person operating the camera. It's also, let's take the operators out of the mix and just say the complex environments that we operate in, right? I mean, if it's a manually controlled flight, most systems are limited in terms of their obstacle awareness and what's going on around them. So very easy to run into things, which means we need other people there, visual observers watching out, to make sure that the drone stays safe, or, simply to comply with FAA regulations if we want to move beyond just the, immediate vicinity that we're operating in. So it's really costly when it comes to the personnel aspect of things. Absolutely.
Got it. And something, Colin, that's really interesting to me is you ask pretty much any drone program, they're all trying to grow and expand. And the overall challenge, there are two challenges. One is an individual pilot can't do that much because you've got to have, in the picture here, right? Each one of those pilots is doing a quarter of the job by themselves. And then the second thing is that there are way more jobs to do, and you can't hire enough pilots fast enough to make it happen. This is a problem that you were solving at Dart Drones. Why is it important to make individual pilots more productive to be able to meet that workload?
Well, I mean, it's all about return on investment, right? I mean, there is no pathway to true scalability until the organizations that are implementing unmanned aircraft are seeing the value, start to come back into their organization. And yes, there's immediate things that you start to see, with improved safety, by taking the tower climber down, we're gonna, or the insurance inspector that possibly could fall off a roof, and that's millions of dollars a year that the insurance companies are paying out for those types of injuries. Even if we do take those out of the equation, the bottom line is, you can't scale a program, you can't invest the money necessary to roll out hundreds or thousands of these aircraft until you're seeing that exponential value, that's coming with the data that you're able to capture. So that's extremely important, and it's a big barrier that we see right now.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. And I think it's important for us to have this conversation before we get into our next topic on autonomy, right? And the reason is, look, we're not putting these four guys out of a job, right? We're splitting them up so that they can each be more productive and provide higher ROI. When there's more return on hiring a drone pilot, more companies, more organizations are going to find it valuable to hire these drone pilots and build their programs. And that's something for us all on this entire webinar to be really, really excited about. The way that Skydio enables these pilots to become more effective and provide higher ROI is through Skydio Autonomy, which is a breakthrough AI engine for flight autonomy that powers every Skydio drone, your Skydio 2, your Skydio X2. Nothing flies like a Skydio because of Skydio Autonomy, which sees the world, understands what it's looking at through a series of neural networks. It predicts not only its own motion, but some of the motion that's happening out in the scene around it. And then it acts through intelligent path planning that helps it dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge, right, through any scene that drone might want to fly around through. And that's why when you look at a lot of other drones and you'll hear about autonomy, what you're really hearing about is a scripted flight where the drone blindly flies between waypoints. But Skydio Autonomy is adaptable to any scene, whether or not you have GPS and whether or not your pilot is sharp enough to quickly intervene, that drone has your pilot's back. We put Skydio Autonomy on 2 world-leading autonomous drones. The Skydio 2 is the one that started it all, that I'm sure many of the attendees have had a chance to fly. That's your autonomous drone that helps you build out your unmanned flight operations with ease, helps you get started. You can train a pilot on it in a couple hours and be doing a real job generating value for your organization on your first day that you fly your Skydio. For those who are looking to move into more advanced applications, you need a little bit more athleticism out of your drone, you're looking for thermal, the Skydio X2 is the enterprise workhorse that'll help you scale your operation in really demanding environments where you need more weight, more packability with a folding airframe, and again, that thermal camera. Now, we've been flying both of these drones across the country, right? And Colin has done the global circuit flying drones. Colin, what's it like when you see somebody get a Skydio 2 or an X2 in their hands for the first time?
Well, I tell everyone there's no way that you can describe, what it's like to fly one of the Skydio aircraft. You really just have to put it in your hands and see what it can do. I put down my pre-order for a Skydio 2 back in 2019, right? And I got my Skydio 2 actually only about a month or so before I started working, before I joined the team in December. And those first flights, were unlike anything I had ever experienced before. And they really did live up to what I was hoping to see when I put that pre-order in, which is, a drone that truly is autonomous. And it's not just being able to fly without input from an operator, but in fully understanding the environment that's around it. That's really the key factor that's right there. And so, whenever people see that, when they experience that for the first time, it just opens their eyes, to really what's possible and where we now are as far as the future, with small unmanned aircraft.
Got it. And what Colin's seeing and all these pilots are seeing is an evolution in drone technology, where the previous technology grew out of toys. It was remote control helicopters that your grandmother gives you for Christmas, and you crash on that exact same day. Been there, got in trouble for it. And then that grew into this age of manual hardware, where these fantastic drone providers like Parrot and Autel would put GPS and magnetometers on their drones and start to put on heavier and heavier payloads. And that was great. The magic of these drones is that once they took off, they would hold still. But that's not good enough anymore. What we've realized is if we're going to actually bring about an age of autonomy where drones can actually do jobs and supplement these teams and make pilots more effective, we can't just be making drones that hold still. We need to make drones that fly. And so the future of the industry is moving towards software and AI-driven autonomy, where obstacle avoidance is fully native. You've got full automation where the drone is actually aware of its surroundings and acting uniquely on what it's seeing. And that lets you generate these integrated solutions where the hardware, the software, and the pilot are all working together to get the job done more effectively than ever before. And if you talk to any Skydio customer, they'll tell you that they're already starting to see these benefits. With Skydio drones, they can get up in the air faster, not only on the individual day when you take it out of the box and launch it, but when you're trying to train a pilot and get a pilot ready to go do jobs. We've had customers who went from onboarding a pilot a month to onboarding 12 pilots a month and growing their operations to global scale. They're easier to fly, meaning that you don't need to invest as much non-job oriented stick time, and just doing the job is enough training. They're safer from obstacles, reducing the risk profile for your entire program. They can fly where others can't, including, if you look at the bottom left, that's inside a transmission tower being flown by a first-time Skydio pilot, where there's no GPS, where a magnetometer on a manual drone would be going crazy. You can see Colin laughing a little bit. I'm sure he's thinking back to a time that he had a close shave in a situation like that.
Yeah, there's too many of those. There's too many of those times to really remember, Guillaume. I'm laughing because this is what I'm out there in the field doing every day right now. I'm doing 3-4 demos a week. For a lot of utility companies, a lot of cellular and communications companies, civil engineers. that have pieces of infrastructure that we would have never thought, we'd be able to fly this close with, EMI interference around transmission towers and, all types of RF interference related to different communication structures. And to put the controller in their hand, and this is not manual flight, this is fully autonomous, and we'll talk about 3D scan, right? But watching that aircraft, recognize the complexity of the structure and fly around it, grabbing all the information that it needs, it's mind blowing, and it's absolutely amazing. But anyway, yeah, I'm just a kid in a candy store. So
you and I both. Colin, tell everybody about that bottom middle picture. Could you ever do that with any other drone besides a Skydio?
Absolutely not. And I think anyone that's on the call with us today already knows that, right? I mean, you look at the confines that are there, you consider the fact that that is all solid metal, construction. This is underneath a bridge, so we've got no GPS, right? We have an extremely tight parameter as far as what the drone can fit in. So, any type of the normal obstacle sensors with their extra bubbles and things that they put on out there, you could never get up into those spaces, the way that you can do with a Skydio platform. No.
Great. And these are really important factors for customers in the enterprise, whether you're doing industrial asset inspection, mapping construction sites, doing residential roof inspection, like our well-known partnership with EagleView, or if you're in the public sector or the defense markets. And because of all these benefits, adoption has been incredibly fast. Since the Skydio 2 came out at the beginning of last year, we've amassed some of the most notable names in each of those markets are starting to adopt Skydio. If you look at groups like Jacobs Engineering, like EagleView, like Brassfield and Gorey, right, or public safety agencies like the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire Department or the Austin PD, or even federal customers like the Western Area Power Administration. I'd like to shout out some of those folks that I saw on the attendance list. Thank you for joining. All of these customers are starting to see the value of autonomy, and these are the first organizations to reap the benefits. And it's an opportunity for each of us on this webinar to find a way to incorporate that into more of these areas, because each of these companies or agencies performs a really important function for society. And it's a much nicer place for all of us to live if these organizations operate efficiently and effectively. And to that end, let's talk about the Skydio enterprise solutions that help these organizations reach those levels of operation. Like I said earlier, we're building an integrated Skydio enterprise architecture that automates the skills of an expert pilot so that any pilot can have the expertise and the ability to get the job done the way that somebody like Colin, who has hundreds of hours of stick time, might be able to with a manual drone. And so that starts down at the bottom with hardware, where we've got controllers, human operators, eventually docks. It goes up into core autonomy functions, like we talked about, that Skydio autonomy that lives on every drone, and then the ability to upgrade that autonomy with the Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation. That gives pilots even more levels of control and AI assistance as they fly. And then moving on up into the advanced AI skills with 3D scan and house scan, where you're able to actually turn over control of decision-making to the drone, where the human operator is in the loop for safety and to intervene in any type of unforeseen crisis, but the drone is actually able to go and capture data in a more effective way than a human operator could. And we're gonna motor through and talk about each of these components really quickly, and then I'll get out of the way and Colin will tell you how to incorporate them on your job sites. Skydio Autonomy Core, like we talked about, lives on Skydio 2 and Skydio X2. And it is part of what underpins your aircraft and your flight controller. And it's accessed through the Skydio Enterprise app, which is a purpose-built in-flight experience for professionals like Colin and many of yourselves on this webinar. Now the Skydio 2, we've talked about, we've flown it. It's the only coworker that I'm not obligated to social distance from. And it provides unmatched autonomy for safe and simple unmanned operations. You've got 360-degree obstacle avoidance built in. You've got autonomous flight, that waypoint planning that we talked about earlier, unprecedented ease of use because the flight apps are designed to look like camera apps. You look at any other drone, you feel like you're in a cockpit flying an aircraft, and they come from that crude aviation background. But Skydio drones are designed to be flying cameras, and that's what makes them so simple. If you can operate an iPhone, you can operate a Skydio 2. Now, the Skydio beacon is something that you can only do when your drone is as autonomous as a Skydio. At that bottom right, that beacon fits in your pocket. I thought I had one here somewhere. There's beacons all over my apartment. But it fits in your pocket, or it straps to your arm, or you can tuck it in your boot. And that lets the drone track you, and you can engage with this drone in an autonomous way, and even point and click and drag your drone across the sky. And it's the best, most shining example of how your interaction with your drone can be completely different once you are flying an autonomous drone. Now, the Skydio 2 is already having some real serious impact out there. Accurate Drone Solutions is a small drone service provider in the Pacific Northwest that serves construction customers. And they were a Phantom 4 Pro V2.0 shop. It used to be that Accurate Drone Solutions logo had the Phantom 4 silhouette, not the Skydio 2 silhouette that you see here today. Now, Sam DeLong is another one of those really, really expert pilots, and especially an expert construction engineer who has done extensive comparisons between his Phantom 4 Pros V2.0 and his Skydio 2s. And after working with his customers and comparing against ground-based LiDAR survey data, he switched from DJI to Skydio because it made a complete difference in the way that he was flying drones. Now, Sam and his team fly with Drone Deploy, right? And a lot of these software providers will try to tell you, hey, when you fly with our piece of software, every drone is the same. And when you throw autonomy in the mix, that's just no longer the case. And if you look at this crane here on the right, this photo was generated during an autonomous grid pattern flight. Now, Colin, you'll have to back me up here. I don't think anyone would try this flight with a manual drone, because you've got to be up above your minimum obstacle clearance altitude, where you're trading off all that resolution to fly up high where there's no obstacles. But by being able to fly lower, not have to worry about these things, he's able to do his scans a lot faster, spend less time processing, and generate better models.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's not even really that. It's just that the flight wouldn't even be possible. You know, if you were doing this with a standard obstacle avoidance on a, we'll say a standard DJI drone, you know, it would be coming back on that leg. And sure, you know, using Drone Deploy, it might recognize that, but it's not going to navigate its way around it and still ensure that it's able to get the right overlaps. You know, essentially, you're going to most likely end up with either a big hole in your map or a flight that's just stalled out. So, you know, yeah, there's really not much else to it.
Right. And you can see that these impacts also affect the largest and most sophisticated organizations on the planet. And the North Carolina Department of Transportation is one example of that. We helped them secure a below bridge BVLOS waiver, where they're able to fly beyond visual line of sight, not legal with any other drone besides a Skydio, to inspect the underside of bridges. And the results have been spectacular for them. They've been able to inspect some of the largest, most complex bridges in their state. And it's to the point where the drone program has caught the attention of the Secretary of Transportation, Eric Boyett. And so we're really excited, not just to be helping our overall organizations, but also helping the individuals in these organizations put drones on the map and turn them into standard tools that are used throughout the organization, and not something that's small and used by an innovation unit. When we talk about how the age of autonomy is about breaking the barriers to drone adoption and turning them into mainstream, commonly used tools that are on every inspector's belt, this is what we mean. The Skydio X2 is the big athletic brother of the Skydio 2. You take the Skydio 2's brain, you put it into a more athletic body, you go from Guillaume Delapine to Colin Romberger. You get all the brains of the Skydio with the brawn of that professional workhorse. The same Skydio autonomy, you're going to be able to operate day and night. You're going to have a 4K HDR camera, also thermal, and a GPS unit on board that lets you fly even in the dark. It's built resilient. Look how rugged that airframe is. All that carbon fiber, those hard bolts to strap down the arms when flying, unfolded so that they're nice and rigid. Those two antennas that give you an unprecedented wireless range for an autonomous drone, and all that paired to the Skydio Enterprise controller You just look at that thing. That thing's a beauty. It's glove compatible. It's got a nice big screen for engaging with all the autonomous software that you're going to be able to with the Skydio. Colin, you must love that thing.
Oh, it's my favorite drone, right? And for those of you that are concerned about noise signatures and things like that, this is actually quieter than our Skydio 2. Those three blade propellers that are out, or three blade props, on the motors, give us a lot more efficiency in terms of flight time. 35 minutes, and that's a true 30 to 35 minutes, depending on environmental factors, not just we say it's 35, but it's really 25, and then the power reserve and everything comes into play. No, you're definitely going to be getting over 30 minutes, regardless of your environmental conditions. Just an extremely powerful workhorse. A lot of people look at some of our specs on the camera with the thermal and things like that, and say, we think we might need a little bit more. We use different processors with our cameras. It's every camera sensor is not created equally. So, I challenge you, see it for yourself before you make up your mind. But in my mind, this is the most powerful system out there right now.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. And we talk a lot about how autonomy matters a lot more than your specs, right? So if the resolution, sure, we can bring the cost down for the airframe by bringing the resolution down and not putting in the most expensive H20T sensor, right? But because you can fly into all these tighter spaces, you're looking a lot closer, and you're able to capture details that a lot of other drones couldn't. I'd love to get your thoughts, Colin, on that 35-minute endurance, because something that folks have come on this webinar series and said before is, well, sure, it's 35 minutes, but it's a useful 35 minutes. I'm up in
Right.
the air faster. I'm doing my mission faster. I'm flying more confidently. Is that something that you're hearing when you're out there flying with customers?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. We had to design this aircraft to be quick deployable. That was a requirement of one of our early adopters and one of our very large users of this platform. So, you can get it up in the air within 90 seconds, which is extremely fast, when you consider even other small systems that are out there right now. So right off the bat, you're in the sky. And I emphasized that earlier, that when we say 35 minutes, under normal circumstances, it is 35 minutes. And even under those more challenging circumstances, where you've got really low temperatures or you've got really high winds, the performance is much less of a drop off than we see with comparable aircraft out there.
Great. Well, with that, let's have some fun. Let's talk software. These are some of the more exciting aspects of the Skydio solution, is that once you've got your hardware in the hands of your professionals, it's easy and seamless to upgrade and just immediately make them more productive. And the first way to do that is by adding the Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation, which is a piece of add-on software that gives your pilot superpowers when they're flying, right? It unlocks this advanced AI pilot assistance for your most complex inspections or your situational awareness missions, as the case may be. But the first thing that you're going to notice is differences in the gimbal. Out of the box, your Skydio 2 gimbal is going to point 45 degrees upwards to be able to look up, right? But you're going to be able to look straight up vertically once you have the Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation. And what's really spectacular about this feature, for anyone who's had to fly a drone in that FPV mode where you're looking down at your screen, you're not looking at the body of your airframe, you can only fly those drones the way that you're looking, right? And so if you're trying to inspect the underside of a bridge, for example, you're going to be near a whole lot of bridge trusses and things that you don't want to hit. And so if you want to look up with any other drone, you're looking up, then you're looking down, you're figuring out where you're going to fly next, and you're looking up. There's a lot of guesswork. But with a Skydio, you can keep the eye on the target by looking straight up, trusting that obstacle avoidance as you navigate around, so that all you need to worry about as the pilot is what you want to look at. That obstacle avoidance that I just mentioned, equally important. With Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation, you're going to be able to get down closer into these scenes, down to 16 inches on the Skydio 2 or 4 on the X2.
Yeah,
And
and
what that is
let
going to
me
let you do
just
is
mention
navigate
something.
through these really, really tight environments.
let me throw something out there real quick, Guillaume, because that's an important number, I think. You know, it's one thing that we bring it down to 16 inches, which is obviously lower than anyone else brings it right now. But the fact that we can fly 4 inches off the rotor blades, and I've seen it in multiple occasions and with wind and everything else, you know, the fact that we can do that and still fly around and have the confidence that the aircraft will recognize its surroundings and navigate, it is an extremely powerful tool when it comes to, you know, what we talked about earlier with those confined space access points. So anyway, just I had to throw that out there because that's one of the more impressive features that I find when we talk about the AEF. So.
Sure is. Yeah, for a new pilot, honestly, the hardest thing to learn there is to trust it, because you're just so not used to seeing drones flying the way that a Skydio does. Now, a couple other features that are part of this Autonomy Enterprise Foundation. First is Super Zoom. This is an exciting one. Not only are you going to be able to digitally zoom in, right? A lot of drones can do that. That's a useful feature, but you're also going to be able to digitally zoom out into all of the navigation cameras. If you look at this Skydio 2, you've got 3 extra cameras on the top, you've got 3 extra cameras on the bottom. And these cameras are constantly working to detect and avoid obstacles. But now with the Autonomy Enterprise Foundation, those are accessible to the pilot too. You literally have eyes in the back of your head. And even if you were sitting on board that drone, if you had the ability to minimize yourself and sit in the cockpit of your Skydio 2, you would not have the awareness that we can provide by providing you this stitched image that lets you look in all directions at once. Another one is point of interest orbit. Here's one where I know Colin's got some stories, but when you set an orbit with a manual drone, you're basically setting and praying that drone isn't going to fly sideways into an obstacle and generate a non-warranty covered collision. With a Skydio, you can set your point of interest and get an orbit going with full obstacle avoidance, so that all you have to worry about is consuming your data, taking in information, and making decisions, whether you're using that orbit to generate footage of a wind turbine or surveil a hostile scene. Colin, any stories there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's like the number one safety thing, you know, when we train, you know, folks on how to use point of interest, right, is always make sure that you're above all the obstacles within the range, you know, within that radius that aircraft's going to be flying around. And it's hard to estimate that. You know, I've seen them flying to the side of buildings. I've seen them flying to the side of cranes, trees, power lines, you know, you name it. You know, I've seen it happen. You know, that was one of the first things I did with my Skydio 2 when I got it, you know, just running off of our standard software, is, you know, lock it on to one of my kids who were, you know, they were out playing in the yard, and you know, put it into an orbit motion track mode and let them run around. And you know, they're running between trees, they're running between outbuildings that we have, and you know, the the Skydio 2 just is effortlessly, you know, adjusting its height, adjusting its radius, as it needs to, you know, not just with someone staying still, but, you know, that dynamic motion, you know, no matter where they go, which was, again, just an incredible experience to see for the first time. So absolutely.
Great, so exciting. And now the moment I've all been waiting for, we're going to talk about 3D scan. And we'll be sharing some information that we haven't before. So this is exciting. I'm going to talk briefly about what's in the product, and then Colin is going to start to show you some of the differences that he's been able to observe. But why are we making 3D scan? Well, it's because inspection and photogrammetry are young. They're in the early days, and while there have been some really impressive models going out there, and there are some really advanced operators, we're not yet at the point where a 3D model is as easy to generate as a video or a photo, and we're not yet at the point where inspection programs can at scale use drones effectively and reliably without a lot of pilot training and angst. The programs that have reached scale are just masterpieces of operational intelligence, right? Some of the finest utilities and training programs in the world. A lot of them are Colin's former clients, right? But the goal here is to get rid of the heavy pilot costs, the hundreds of hours of required pilot training that go into it. Stop gathering low quality data because you have to fly so far off the scene to avoid crashing your drone, right? Less worry for all of the program managers who've got a bunch of idiots my age flying around trying to fly these drones effectively, right? And finally be able to access all the applications of 3D scanning software. And if you just stop to think about it for a little bit, any of us who've flown with Drone Deploy or Pix4D, right? Fantastic pieces of software, but they're limited by the manual drones that they have to fly on. And as a result, you get these 2D planar capture patterns, right? Where you're flying in a straight plane, or recently there's a facade mode, right? Where you're flying vertically, or you're flying in these really simple orbits, right? But you're trying to take a 2D flight software to scan a 3D scene, right? You don't have to think very hard to realize that there's a better way out there. And so that's what we're building with 3D Scan. And this product will be available later this year. It's one that we've got available in limited early access. And we're going to share a sneak peek right now of some of the results that we've been able to gather. But this is an adaptive scanning solution for autonomous inspection data capture of any scene that you could decide that you want to inspect and get full comprehensive data of. You're going to have an AI-driven workflow. So all you're going to do is set a bounding box and say, Skydio, go and take all the pictures of every surface in that area. It's fully adaptive and building its map as it flies through the air to make sure that there's no gaps and that you have all the full coverage that you need, so that as soon as the drone lands, you can look at the edge model that has been computed and do an instant field assessment and be able to see right away, where do I have data? Where am I missing stuff? Where do I have a blind spot? And you're going to be able to give all of this power to any worker on your team, whether or not they're a full-time drone pilot or not. Now this drone can just be another tool on their belt, just like a hammer or a wrench, but cooler and smarter. We're hoping to bring about a new era of mapping and inspection for however you use your data, right? Whether you're doing rapid field assessments where you need to make sure you take pictures of everything, make some decisions in the field and do the repairs on the spot, whether you're trying to maintain digital twins so that you can have a virtual record of an asset base, whether you're trying to generate detailed inspection reports because you're a drone service provider and you need to provide better data to your clients, or whether you're generating evidence for crime or accident scene reconstruction because you're a police officer or a firefighter. 3D Scan is going to change the way that all of these professions deliver their results. It's going to make it safer, easier, and more effective. And we know that this is going to be a very large change for a lot of organizations that have to reimagine their operations, sometimes change up their training programs and their personnel. And that's why the rest of this webinar is going to be dedicated to talking about best practices for getting yourself to the age of autonomy. And the goal here was to introduce Colin here at the end as your expert and your guide to best practices. But as usually happens, when you get a couple of drone guys on a webinar, we got excited and just started talking drones. But Colin, why don't we start with a bit of your background and then we'll jump into a few examples.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Yeah, so for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting in the past, my name's Colin Romberger, and I've been involved in professional unmanned aircraft operations for about 8 years at this point. The last 5 years before I came over to Skydio, I was the chief pilot and lead UAS operations consultant for a company called Dart Drones. And we were, and I believe still are, the largest provider of in-person training and consulting for unmanned aircraft systems, based here in the United States. That's why I said earlier, my expertise, comes in the fact that I've had the pleasure of working with and hearing the needs of a lot of different industries and users of drones, and helping them, either lay the foundation for their programs and build things out so that they could be successful at the early stages, or come in and help them sort out issues that they were having and try and improve the results that they were obtaining, in terms of data capture. My first few years when I got started back in late 2013, early 2014, was as a drone service provider. I mentioned I'm an aviation nut. Growing up, I loved anything that flew. My dad flew RC planes, and he taught me how to build and fly RC planes. When I was in high school, I started taking flying lessons myself, although that was very expensive, working part-time jobs. But ended up switching over and jumping out of airplanes for a while I was in college. Worked as a skydiving instructor, and then after finishing college, was able to also finish my private pilot certificate, and was really just, I enjoy blue weather flying. I'm a tailwheel kind of guy if I can. I'll bring my kids up and fly in a super decathlon, or any type of, maybe an older Cessna 140 or something like that. Anyway, loved flying. And when the FAA started talking about their plans to integrate unmanned aircraft back in 2012, I tried to jump on board relatively quickly. So got my Section 333 exemption, initially started doing some real estate work, but pretty quickly got switched over to support of the construction industry. I was working for another organization at the time where I had a lot of contacts within the construction field. So that's where I cut my teeth on mapping and modeling with drones. And then, kind of learned, as many of us did, on our own. Started working with some GIS folks within the companies that I was working with, and took that knowledge over to dart drones then when I joined the team back in late 2015, early 2016. So yeah, I've been doing this full time for quite a while now, and it's been just fantastic to see how things are evolving. And that's again the main reason why I took the opportunity to join the Skydio team when I did, because I know where the future of the industry is going and has to go. And I feel truly, that we are the company that is best aligned to deliver on that. So we'll go ahead and keep jumping through.
That's awesome. Colin, we're so lucky to have you. Let's talk about some roadways and highways.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of my early work, before joining dart drones as a trainer and a consultant, but, going back to my time as a service provider, was spent, doing construction support, and a lot of our projects involved roadway constructions. So, a lot of two-dimensional products, which kind of misleading, when we say two-dimensional. Yes, we were most concerned with the orthomosaic, and the downward-facing perspective. And it could be used for a variety of different reasons. Things that were more estimate driven, and looking at efficiencies, of things getting done in terms of the big picture of the project, where we only needed relative or local accuracy. And then other things related to documents of record, where we were incorporating, obviously, ground control points, and generating things that were properly geo-referenced and could be layered, with other geo-reference project files and things as well. But there were always downsides, because we weren't always just concerned about what's that straight down picture look like. A lot of times folks wanted to do volumetric estimations to monitor aggregate stockpiles and things that were on different sites. And so, there was, or also track contour changes, with the terrain over different areas, if there were changes going on with that as part of the project. So anyway, it was, you could, with any data set, as I'm sure a lot of the traditional way that we would capture these mapping data sets was the drone would fly a lawnmower pattern, right, back and forth over the area, camera straight down, capturing those images. A little bit later on, we got to the point where we could do crosshatch patterns if we wanted to. So we had a little bit of an angle there, go in multiple directions. But the problem was flying everything at one altitude, especially if that altitude was pretty high, to avoid the height of trees or buildings or things like that within the area. Even if you were capturing some obliques, some angled shots, you weren't really getting the full detail when you got down to that, low ground level type of assessment, which is where, a lot of the really valuable data was coming from. So, the meshing of the stockpiles may have been not 100% correct. You weren't able to see, all of the abnormalities within a road surface, especially if you're looking at a bridge surface or something like that, because you're ground sampling distance. I mean, if you could get, if you still, the buzzword is 1 centimeter ground sampling distance, right? If you can get 1 centimeter, you're in good shape, and we have confidence with that. But the thing is, if we were looking at the final rendering, as part of our assessment, as opposed to the individual photos, you still really couldn't get down and see all of the detail. And that, screwed with our contour depictions, gave us difficulties with volumetric calculations at times, and also just limited our ability to see certain things when we were looking at that final production. So, what we've seen with 3D scan, the furthest away that we fly is about 30 feet, which, is incredible in terms of then the ground sampling distance that we're producing right off the bat. And we can fly as close as 3 feet, depending on what we're looking at, which again, we'll talk about in some of the follow-on slides. But from a road construction perspective, and Sam, we'll talk about that, can tell you about that as well. If you reach out to him at Accurate Drone Solutions, having that extra resolution is really a game changer. So yeah, let's move on to the next one, and we'll talk a little bit more about the structures, Oh, there we go.
Great, that's awesome. So exciting. Let's up the stakes and talk about more difficult work. Moving up into some of the.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, looking at the structures, this is just a basic, 4-sided type structure, normal building type structure. This is actually my house in Pennsylvania, and we just threw this in here to illustrate some things. We've done a lot of demonstrations, of the 3D scan technology for entities that we'd love to share additional models with you guys today. But, it's a process to get the right approvals and everything else. So, this just kind of illustrates for you a little bit of what we're talking about with, some of the changes we see in just standard performance when it comes to using 3D scan for structural modeling. So on the left-hand side, you can see a picture, which just illustrates for you the limitations of, again, those 2-dimensional flight patterns, right? One set altitude flying over the area, so you're limited to either your straight nadir images looking straight down, or those 1 altitude obliques in a crosshatch or some type of a perimeter format. And that's going to obviously create a lot of challenges. You usually always have to get down lower and do multiple, manual passes, or use a point of interest mode, something like that, to gather the extra information. With 3D scan, we don't even have to, worry about that anymore. The photo on the right, and I say photo, it looks like a photo. That's a rendered model, that we processed. That one was done in drone deploy. Again, we use 3D scan. We dropped 4 pillars around the house just to say, here's the area that we want the aircraft to focus on. And then we turn it over to the Skydio system. The Skydio system isn't just saying, okay, well, you said the box is this high and here are the 4 corners. I'm just going to fly around it and take, a series of mechanical pre-programmed gimbal angle shots or something like that. No, the first phase in 3D scan is an explorative phase. So it actually flies around and learns the facets and the shape of the structure that's in there. It learns every detail, and then it knows exactly where to go and what camera angles to use to ensure that it's getting the full coverage. And you can see that, these photos aren't super enlarged, but this is a little awning area that we have outside of the front door. So this is a big overhang feature. You can see the overhangs around the gutters and things in different areas up in there. Again, any overhanging feature with typical, software to do 3D modeling is extremely difficult to capture, even if it is changing altitude and gimbal angles. But 3D scan gets it right every time, literally every time. So it's amazing capabilities. And, as we talked about before, we're able to fly anywhere. It doesn't matter if we have GPS coverage or GPS connectivity or not, because again, the aircraft is not using waypoints, GPS waypoints, to figure out where to fly when we give it its flight profile. It's visual recognition, and again, We can't name all the companies and things that we've showed this to, or that I've had the pleasure of showing this to. But I can tell you, I've done this in hangars at international airports as far as airliner inspections, and people are blown away with the results. So it's an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah, and speaking of being blown away with results, some of the more advanced 3D scan work that we've done, we've actually head on over to skydio.com/blog and take a closer look and actually click around in 3D on the models on the right here. These both look like photos, but they're actually screenshots from the 3D models. One of an abandoned jet in a field, and one of a crane mast. This is the mast that would hold up a tower crane at a port. So head over to skydio.com/blog and you can learn a lot more about how these were made. Each of them done in less than 45 minutes of flying and processed the same day.
Yep.
And the results, if you click in and you really look at some of the details in some of these models, are just spectacular. The texture that you can get on these meshes.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, there's no question, about it. Because I mean, I've seen the $100,000+ rigs that were necessary to get even close to this level of detail when we were talking about modeling, off of images captured from a drone in the past. And to think that we're doing this with $1,000 piece of hardware, right? And beyond that, software enablement, right? So again, it's just like a smartphone, right? How much power do we have by putting a new app on there? And we're coming up with ideas for new apps every day. So we can not only do this and create these models, but we can also take the intelligence of 3D scan and possibly even, train it for something very specific, within your particular area of need. So very powerful. The photo over on there on the left, again, just shows you how between two houses, right? Even if you're using, manual flight techniques, or you're using some of these new facade modes where the drone will get down in lower passes to go around things, it's still GPS based. GPS in drones is still, has a window of margin of error, right? Up to a few meters. And so trying to get in between gaps in between two buildings and things like that, oftentimes isn't going to be able to do it. So you still end up with the warping that you see there on the one side, the melting.
definitely.
When it comes to 3D scans, it's a non-issue. So
Yeah, so we're starting to get low on time here. We've got about 3 minutes left. As always happens, the drone guys got excited. So I'd like to leave you guys with a couple thoughts. Thank you so much, Colin. The first is, when you're starting to set up your UAS program, there are a few things that you need to think about. And this is a checklist here that talks about performing risk assessments, understanding the data that you're going to get, setting your concept of operations, proving it out, training and expanding your team, and sustaining the program. These are all important factors that we are happy to dig into. And so what I would urge you to do, if you've seen something that interests you in this webinar, is reach out to us, fill out a contact us form on Skydio.com. And what's amazing about working directly with a manufacturer like Skydio is that you get access to experts like Colin, right? So as soon as you fill out this form and start to interact with our sales team, they'll put together a demonstration for you, and we will send Colin or somebody like him. He's not the only superstar in Skydio, though he sure is a bright one. And we'll be on site there to help you prove this out, help you bring your organization up to speed on what it is that you're trying to accomplish with drones, how you're going to get there, and making sure that you fill out all these steps, and that as you build your program, you measure twice and cut once, right? What we want is for these programs to move forward and always take one step forward, not take two forward and one back, and two forward and one back, because you tried one drone, it didn't work. You tried flying a lot, you had a crash, right? There are so many ways for a drone program to go wrong, but so many fewer when you work directly with a manufacturer who's based in the U.S. and will bring experts on scene with you. And so this concludes our content. I'll leave you with some pictures of Colin out there crushing it in his previous drone endeavors. It's been a real thrill to be with you for the last hour, Colin, and also everybody else on the attendee list. Thank you so much for coming. We hope that you have a great rest of your week and that you are out there flying safe, keeping safe from the pandemic, and staying excited out there. Everybody, again, will get a recording of the webinar. And anybody whose questions we didn't get to, please do get in touch. We just love talking drones, and we're going to love talking drones with you. So thank you, Colin. Thank you to our hosts at InterDrone. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.